What's up, y'all? Peace. Um, Today I wanted to get into a few topics. Um, there's a lot of topics I want to get into, but I'm gonna kind of flow, see if I get through them or not. I'm gonna be channeling most of this shit. I don't be having scripts or nothing like that. There ain't nothing behind me on the walls. I don't got bullet points. I don't got none of that shit. Just some topics in my head, and then fucking just spew the information I got, the downloads I got, the channels I get once I start really flowing into this shit. Okay. And I don't think I've properly introduced myself, right? I know some of y'all watch my content a little bit, and maybe I've dropped a few things here and there, but me, I'm Angel, okay? Come from the Bronx, right? Born and raised, right? And that's where I lived most of my life. I didn't really travel much. Kind of a rough environment. You know what I mean? Family been through some things, you know, and there's some good, there's some bad, like everyone else. I know I'm being really vague on this shit, but I came back here for a reason. Okay, so a lot of my life I was living in the Bronx. I didn't know none of this shit. Okay, and I would study shit, and that was kind of the thing that saved my life. Was like studying, kept me out of certain shit, in a way as much as it possibly could. And fucking, I can't really tell you what sparked the urgency within this shit. I do know there's a lot of great spiritual teachers I had around me in my life, along with sources that I've come across over time. I'll even name drop people like, Bobby Hammett, Rashad Jamal, shit like that, later over time. And, those are two people who help spark, for me, the urgency of why that shit matters, and putting the respect on your ancestors and not really viewing that shit in the negative context. And I think it's important that people really tune in to who they are, where they come from, because then they'll figure out their missions and why they're here and why they're sent here, what they're sent here to do, and what's the importance of that, the relevance of it. Okay, the relevance of that is your ancestors matter. Okay, and a lot of the way society is constructed right now, there's not a lot of respect on those things, and a lot of the practices and histories and sciences are kind of frowned upon and discussed in a negative connotation. Okay, and within this negative view that they're fucking talking about your ancestors are the powers and the fucking communications in which they left us, right? So that we could tap in and actually be able to communicate with them. Okay? And the problem is they give us these false people who didn't exist in history, and then we martyr them, and then you almost view them as an ancestor. And what happens is that fucks you up. Okay, because now you can't really tap into your ancestors, and you kind of view their shit as demonic, right? And then they're trying to communicate, but then they can't, because you're looking at their shit all fucked up, and then you're fucking viewing people who don't exist as people who do exist, right? And you're not conjuring up nothing, right? But just freaking blanks, right? They want you to view your ancestors like they were in mud huts, with like sticks and stones and shit like that, and somehow they built shit like pyramids and these structures, right? According to them, somehow, right? And even like Native Americans, they want them to think they just had these little fucking naguas, and they were just walking around like, imagine fucking Native Americans in New York with just naguas, like in the fucking cold, acting like they didn't have fucking wood cabin logs, acting like they didn't have they wasn't in charge of the beaver trade, like they didn't have the freshest jackets out here. Like, there's a lot of misinformation in history, You know, and then when it comes to this new shit with the Tartaria and all that shit, that's like, that's giving a view as to the technologies that were around and shit like that. And then when it comes to all these world fairs that were going on and the technologies that they had and shit like that, that was a look more into the old world on how shit was, okay? Because people weren't how they saying it was. It wasn't how it's saying it was, okay? Because if you were to dig underground when it comes to different places like America and other places, there's underground motherfucking cities and shit. And a lot of that shit, they just built over it, okay? And that's what they're calling the Tartarian shit, right? Which is just the history that they're trying to hide, right? So they covered it up with all those mud floods and all this shit, all these natural disasters that they could create with fucking technologies and shit like that. Shit that they say is motherfucking, that, you know, that's like frowned upon in rules of engagement, but you know how they play dirty as fuck, right? So the technology exists, we just don't use it, shit like that, right? So Tartaria, actually, the place, right? Because they're just calling the fucking underground, motherfucking the old world. So just calling that Tartaria, like that's the name. But the place Tartaria, where it really was, is in Russia. Okay? And that's where the Scythians are, and the Scythians, right? And dude, their bloodlines where the motherfucking Druids come from and all that shit. Okay? Even the Huns, the white Huns and shit like that. The fucking, some of the fucking bloodlines of Egypt and shit like that. Okay? And their fucking bloodlines come from the Canaanites, right? Which come from the reptilians, and the reptilians come from the fucking parasites that fucking, right? Which are the dinosaurs that came from the fallen fucking ones, right? Okay, when they died, fucking boom. Then later on, petrified. Okay, yeah, following the fucking timeline now, shit that's happening. Okay, so the Scythians, they were in charge of the Orders of the Dragon, right? And in their army, they fucking had armor that it was like snakes, okay? And the druids worship motherfucking snakes and dragons. They revered them like fucking royalty. Okay, that's how true it is, like royalty. Okay? They actually called themselves, I forgot the name, but they called themselves fucking servants of the snakes. Okay, or servants of the dragons. Okay? So why is that important? Okay, because those are the bloodlines of the elites that over time, basically, what happened was these bloodlines, right? There's from different places now, right? We got different countries and shit like that. A lot of the bloodlines married in to each other. And that shit was happening even up to 1400s, right? Where fucking in Spain and shit, where families are merged together under one name. That shit happened even in Puerto Rico, where you talk about Guebana and fucking like the Columbus and Cortez, and how like these families fucking merged and shit like that. That shit happens all the time with the royal class, okay? And what that is has to do with these recent reports coming out too, with the vampires and shit like that. What that has to do with is basically these elite families, right? They fucking marry into each other, right? So that they could keep the fucking alchemical secrets and shit like that, and push religion and shit like that onto people, right? And then those rich people that are practicing alchemy and shit, those are who the fuck we're calling vampires and shit like that. Okay? That's why vampires are always in motherfucking castles and shit like that. Okay? And Dracula, right? Dracul in Latin means motherfucking dragon. Okay? And fucking Prince Charles says that he's directly fucking related to Vlad the Impaler. Okay? And what does he sit on? The throne of the dragon. Right? And then you got this film. It's a vampire film. I forgot the name. And fucking the name of the vampire, Dracula, his name is Carl Stein. Then you got the Carl Stein motherfucking castle, right?